quick, I've got something to show you. My foxgloves are in flower. I've just spotted a scabious in flower and my seeds have germinated. So if you find things like that exciting too, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel. All you need to do is to tap the button marked subscribe, and that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your tablet or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. There they are, my lovely foxgloves. And my one single scabious, although I've got quite a lot of buds that will soon be in bloom. And definite signs of germination there. I've got a few jobs in the garden to tackle. I'm going to empty out all the containers that I'd planted up last summer, and as a bit of reward I'm going to cut some peonies to endure indoors. What I'm discovering in my gardening journey is that you have to have all the right tools to hand, or else it takes so much longer to get anything done. So I'm going to empty out my pots, and in doing that I'm going to replant what's in the pots, what's overwintered, into my flower beds. So I know that I'm going to have to water my plants in. So my first job of the day is to have a lineup of watering cans, so that I don't then have to dig a hole and then go backwards and forwards and try and find water. So I'm getting the water direct from my water butt, which is quite low at the moment. Then I'm going to corral all my pots in one place again, so I don't have to keep going backwards and forwards. So trying to work more efficiently. I've been mulling over in my head for a while what I'm going to do with my spent compost, and in fact I asked several of my gardening friends and they've all come up with different suggestions. Some of them seem to use them as compost at the bottom of very large tubs, sort of packing out the bottom. Others use it as a mulch, and others put it direct onto the compost heap. So I have actually got two compost heaps, one for our green compost, it hasn't rotted down, and then another one where the material has already rotted down. I think that could be an option. But before I can get on with that, the next problem job is trying to dig around in our open-sided shed to find a wheelbarrow, which rather inconveniently is right at the back. So I'm moving the stash of tools. I will say it's my husband that's left the tools here in the open-sided shed. I am under firm instructions whenever I take a tool from the locked shed, the covered shed, I have to return it to the exact place I've got it. But of course, his tools, his rules. And I think what he tends to do is to use an implement, and then for ease of using it next time, leaves it out in this covered area. So you can see that he's got quite a selection. And I was hunting for a hoe last week. Turns out we've got two hoes, one in the shed and one in this outside area. So I don't know about you, but we seem to get a collection of old pots, things we're going to save. And as I'm going through looking at all this rubbish, I have actually made a pile at the side, and I'm going to suggest to my husband that he looks through it to see whether he actually wants me to put all this stuff back when I return the lawnmower, and whether it's time that some of it gets thrown away. And I'm pleased to report, once I'd done the hard work of semi-clearing out this shed, there was an agreement that some of it definitely was rubbish. So manhandling the wheelbarrow out of this confined space. The wheelbarrow needs its wheel pumping up, so it's not quite so easy to move. Anyway, I struggled here for a few minutes, again just trying to do the prep, all the horrible jobs in order that the emptying of my tubs and containers would will go more smoothly rather than me having to stop every few minutes to find the next tool that I need. I've picked up a hand trowel and a hand fork, and I've got my compost bin at the side. So the first tub I'm going to empty is this galvanised bucket, full of what you might assume is just forget-me-nots. But inside is my hydrangea, the one that had the cone-shaped flowers, and I cut them, cropped them to enjoy indoors as a mound of hydrangeas. So I'm going to get rid of the forget-me-nots, put those straight into the compost heap, shaking off much as the soil as I can to then reveal my plant, and hopefully it'll be in a fit state for repotting or planting out into the garden. Next job, tell the dog to stop barking and then get on and dig myself a hole. I've chosen to use a trowel for this job, but very quickly decide it's just not big enough. So I'm going to tackle the garden spade, and if you've been following along with my gardening adventures for a while, you'll know that digging is one of my weak points. I felt I had more control over the trowel, but I think it's going to have to be the right tool for the right job. And look, I did it! Come and give me a cheer in the comments, and make sure you like this video and share it with a gardening friend who needs a little bit of encouragement, just like me. So I've managed to dig myself a decent sized hole, and I've also managed to expose my dahlia tubers. I thought my dahlias had died in the ground. There's absolutely no sign of growth, but these look quite healthy. So I'm going to put them to one side and replant them. So using the watering cans that I'd filled from the barrel earlier on, I'm going to water the empty hole, let that soak down a little bit, and then replant the hydrangea, firm the soil back in and give it another watering from the top. And then I'm going to repeat the whole process with the rest of my pots. Feverfew, I didn't plant this, it's self-sown from our beds. So I'm going to get that into the garden too. It survived quite well, had a little bit of wilting the first evening, but I just made sure I watered it in well, and it seems to have recovered quite nicely. I think I might also have some astrantia in this pot. There's definitely something that's growing, and I can't quite remember what it is. I'm probably going to have to refer back to the little tags that I left in my Sarah Raven garden journal, or perhaps even re-watch one of my old videos. And what I am making sure I do is to save the crocks that I put at the bottom of the pots, so I can reuse those another time. I decided to plant the feverfew so it mirrored the feverfew on the other side of the steps into our garden, because in that particular spot I did have some oriental lilies which I was gifted last summer by some friends, and they've never resprouted, much like my dahlias. But when I dug down, I found the lily bulbs, and again they looked to be in quite a healthy state, although there was no new growth. So I've just replanted those alongside where they were originally, and fingers crossed, let's see whether they grow this summer. I'm now at the end of my replantings. I've got a delphinium to plant, and then I think it's two astrantia. There's just a tiny bit of growth showing, really. It's a bundle of twigs and a little bit of root, but I'll plant them anyway, and if they work, they work, but if they don't, I shall pull them out, and it'll give me a little bit more space to plant something else. One thing I've learned about planting containers is that you really need to consider the shape of the container. It was much easier taking the compost out of my straight-sided galvanised bucket and my more or less straight-sided large plastic terracotta looking pot. But you're watching me here as I struggle with this sort of coal scuttle style planter. It's quite bulbous, so the bottom of the pot is actually wider than the mouth of the pot. So I was struggling to release my delphiniums, and I had another pot as well, quite a classic urn, which was quite difficult to empty. So I think I've discovered something for myself. If you are going to use containers, choose a straight-sided one or a slightly fluted edge one, and not the classic urn or a more bulbous shape. I would like to reuse these rounded pots though, because I do think they look really nice. So what I've done is I've saved some of the plastic tubs, plastic pots from when I did that mini shed clear out, and found ones that just sit nicely in the mouth of my shaped pots, so I can put them to good use, and it gives them a nice visual interest in the garden by not having the same sized and shaped containers throughout. I absolutely love this metal urn, although it's not metal, it's plastic and it's had a special coating put on it. And when I lifted it up, guess what? Loads of soil had fallen out at the bottom, and on closer inspection, I've discovered I've got ants. Is this a good thing or a bad thing for my garden? I'm not quite sure. Let me know in the comments what you think. I did do a little bit of research online, and I don't think ants are necessarily a bad thing. The advice is, if you've got them and you want to get rid of them, is to douse the area with water, and that will disperse them. And if you've got ants in your compost heap, it's a sign that it's too dry. But the advantage of them is that they do break up the soil a little bit. I hope this isn't making you feel too itchy. And as you can see from the soil that fell out of the pot, it was so fine. Really, really lovely. So I tipped the pot into my wheelbarrow full of spent compost, and I've attempted to tidy up a little bit. I've put my tools away, I've tucked the wheelbarrow to one side. I went indoors to have a cup of tea, and I stood at the kitchen window, and what did I spot? The birds love me. I've given them a fabulous buffet to feast on. So that was a robin, and this is a blackbird just coming and having a look at what's on offer. I thought this made such a great bird table, and then when my husband came home, he said I really needed to cover it up. We've got rain forecast, and he said as the wheelbarrow doesn't have any drainage holes, the compost would just change, would just become a sludgy mess. So I've covered it over with a tarpaulin, pending my decision on what I'm actually going to do with it. I hope you enjoy watching the birds feed, and of course the background noise of the birds chirping in my garden. Now, one thing I am going to do is to cut myself some of my peonies. You'll have noticed that I don't have any peonies in my side of the garden. There are peonies in my husband's side of the garden. I bought a bunch of coral charm peonies many years ago, possibly 5, 7, 8 years ago. And my husband loved them so much that we went out and looked for a plant. So they've been sitting established in his side of the garden, and normally they come into flower in the last week of May, which is May half term for us. But this year they've been a couple of weeks early, so I've actually been able to enjoy them indoors. So let's scoot on to a couple of days later, see me collecting some peonies and then arranging them to bring indoors. And here are the coral charm peonies in my husband's side of the garden, which you'll notice is rather overgrown and has got an infestation of bindweed. My husband always jokes, of course I can cut anything from my garden for flower arranging, but he doesn't want to see where the gaps are. So normally when I cut, I just have a couple of stems here and there, but because these peonies are so showy, the larger open blooms are easily the size of my outstretched hand. It's going to be obvious where I've cut them, but he does enjoy having them indoors, so I know he's not going to be too disappointed that they're no longer growing in the garden. Now, the beautiful thing about the coral charm peony is that it changes colour over time. It starts off with quite almost a reddish tone to it, and then as the bud opens up, it becomes a softer pink and eventually fades through apricot to eventually an ivory white, and then the petals shatter and fall off. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll know I absolutely love going to the charity shop, and I've got a growing collection of all sorts of vintage flower arranging paraphernalia, including I don't know how many of these glass flower blocks, flower bricks, flower frogs. So I thought I might as well put them to good use. This one normally sits on my kitchen windowsill. I use it to store my bottle brushes in, but today I'm going to use it for its intended purposes and put it at the bottom of my vase. I just need to straighten it up there a little bit. Flower frogs are really handy for holding your flowers in position, so I've picked just 5 of my peony blooms, and if I was to put those into quite a wide necked vase such as this one, they would just all flop to the sides, but because I can angle the stems into the holes of the flower frog, the stems will stand up and stay where I want them to be. This style of flower arrangement isn't so much as an arrangement as a cut and plonk, so I'm going to work with my biggest flowers first, just concerned that I don't want to knock them too much. I don't want any of those petals to fall off, and then positioning them so they're all slightly spaced out. And as I work my way through and get to the smaller flowers, they just rise up a little bit and they're showing off. You can see every single flower, making sure my growing efforts are well and truly appreciated. Thanks so much for joining me on today's video. I'd love to have your views on what you do with your spent compost from your tubs and containers. What would you do about the ants? And if you love all things flower arranging, I'd love to see what you've been growing in your garden. Why don't you post a picture in my Facebook group, Flower Start World? I'll leave a link to it in the description underneath this video. And if you want to have a more formal flower arranging class, why not join my YouTube membership group and you get free access to my monthly online flower arranging club. Well, that's all for me for now, and I'll see you again next time.